Hey everybody, this is Miss Segovia and I'm going to tell you a little bit about carbohydrates. We love carbohydrates. As you can see in this picture, they're all the yummy grains and sugars and things that we just love to munch on. What's really cool about carbohydrates, we use them as our energy molecules. Y'all know when you get on a big sugar buzz, you've got lots and lots of energy to do lots and lots of things. So what are carbohydrates? They're compounds that are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, which is where the word carbohydrate comes from. The CH2O is our basic formula, and you're going to see multiples of this throughout biology, but the most common will be C6H12O6. The function of carbohydrates is for energy and energy storage, to give us raw materials to build and make structural things out of them. Our monomer is the sugar, which are linked together into what will form these awesome polymers. And so we see them in sugars, starches, and cellulose. Sugars themselves will always be named in ose. So you might see glucose, sucrose, fructose, galactose, all sorts of stuff. They are classified by their number of carbons. So a 6 carbon would be known as hexose. A 5 carbon is pentose. And a 3 carbon is triose, or also a glyceraldehyde. Now we're not going to get much into the big naming thing, but just know that that exists, and every now and then you'll see it. Structurally, sometimes you have those carbohydrates that come in the straight form, but when we put in them to solution, they form rings. Where might you find solutions in biology? Inside you, your cells. You're made mostly of water. Our carbons can also be numbered, and so when we put numbers on them, we always start in the far right and go around. You'll see a little tick mark to the top there, this mark right here that I'm talking about, that we call that a prime. So this would be 1 prime, 2 prime, 3 prime, 4 prime, 5 prime, and 6 prime. Our 3 prime and our 5 prime are really important when we talk about DNA. And so we'll get to that in a little bit, but for right now, know that 3 prime and 5 prime are super duper important. All our carbon-carbon bonds that we have here too, anytime you see carbons bonded together, there is energy storage. You can think of these little bonds from carbon 4 to carbon 5 as storing lots and lots of energy, like a spring would store energy. And when we break those bonds, we release that energy and we can use it to do stuff. And so when you do digestion, you break bonds and you get tons and tons of energy. So what kind of sugars do we have out there? We have monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. So our simple one monomer sugars are monosaccharides like glucose. Disaccharides have 2 monomers, sucrose, and polysaccharides are huge polymers like our starches, our grains, things we see like that. When we want to build our sugars, we use a process called dehydration synthesis. And so you can see here on our little monomers, on both sides we have an O and an H, so OH and HO. And when we combine those, we can actually take 2 of the H's off and 1 of the O's off to get H2O. We'll leave behind 1 little oxygen, which we're going to form what we call a glycosidic linkage. So here's our animation. Glucose plus glucose is our monosaccharides joining, and we get our water out of there. Those two put together are called maltose, forming our glycosidic linkage. And where do you find maltose? Alcoholic beverages. No, say it ain't so. Let's go something a little more common. Here we have 2 sugars, a glucose and a fructose, and you can see you still have that same OH, HO sticking off the ends there. When we bond those, we get our water coming out of it, and then we form our sucrose, better known as table sugar. You'll notice this is called dehydration synthesis, because what are we doing? We're removing water. We're dehydrating it. Yummy, yummy, yum. Polysaccharides are polymers of our sugars. These don't take a whole lot of energy to build, and we can also break them pretty easily. We use them for energy storage in starches, so your plants, those starchy roots, carrots, potatoes. We can also use a glycogen in animals in your liver and muscle cells. Sometimes you feel like you get like a little sugar rush when you get tired or your second wind. That's usually the glycogen being released into your system. And then we can also have polysaccharides in structure, cellulose in plants, and chitin in arthropods and fungi. I know that looks like chitin, but it is pronounced chitin. So that outer shell that you see on those guys is actually made of a very complex sugar. Linear versus branch polysaccharides are starches are pretty linear and our glycogens get very branched, and that is for the energy storage. Slow release in our plants, fast release in our animal tissue. And so you might hear about runners carb loading before a big race, eating lots of pasta, and so they can get a lot of that slow release energy in their system and be able to have greater endurance. Branching gives us more to break. Our polysaccharide diversity. Our polysaccharides have a little bit of difference to them. It doesn't look like much. It's really subtle. But here we have isomers of glucose. Isomer is a term you're going to hear in chemistry where they have the same chemical formula, the same numbers of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but they're put together just a little bit differently. Your hands, left hand and right hand, are technically isomers of each other. And so on here you'll see on our alpha glucose we have the hydroxide on the bottom, and our beta glucose we have the hydroxide in the top. We find the alpha in starches and the beta in cellulose. Now, why might that be a big deal? Well, we have these cool little enzymes inside our system that break things down. Starches are really easy to digest because our little enzyme is trained to break only those bonds that are formed in that downward shape that you're seeing right here. Our cellulose, however, is really difficult to digest because our enzyme has nowhere to grab on. It's used to only grabbing the downward, but now there are these upward ones here. The oxygen's pointing towards the top, and the enzyme can't latch on, can't break them down. And so animals have developed a way in order to break that cellulose that we just can't do. Cellulose is the most abundant organic compound on Earth. Grass is cellulose. We see it everywhere. But we can't break it down. You cannot go chew on your lawn and get enough energy to live. So we carnivores can't do that, and that's why we have to eat meats to get most of our energy, because we're used to breaking down the other forms of our carbohydrates. Cellulose can't do it. And so how is it that a cow can go out and digest it while we can't? Well, cows can digest it because they've got this really cool stomach setup. Gorillas like us can't do it. So they add other sugars to their diet like fruits. How do cows do it? They've got bacteria that help them out. And so inside their digestive system, there are little pockets of bacteria that have developed ways to break down the cellulose. Have you ever heard of cows having 4 stomachs? Well, it's technically 4 different regions. So the rumen, the reticulum, and then the omasum and the abomasum. Now there's also a part 2 where a cow will eat the food and it'll burp it back up and chew on it some more. And so it'll be like you in the middle of 4th period coughing up some of your lunch and chewing on it and swallowing it again. Cows call that cud. And so it looks like a cow's chewing on bubble gum. It's really their lunch from earlier. They've regurgitated back up. Now, not all animals can do regurgitation, and so they have to do it a little differently. By the way, cows are called ruminants. Sorry about that. And so our cute little bunny rabbits. Bunny rabbits wish that they could just cough things up and chew on it again, but they do something a little bit differently. They eat their own poop. Yes, bunny rabbits do that. They're called caprophages, and they will chew on their poop and they will redigest that food a second time. It's the same thing that the cows do. It's just that the cows burp it up, the bunnies poop it, and then eat it again. It's disgusting, I know, but it works for the little hippity hoppers. Just think about that at Easter when you're getting little bunny kisses. So let's build some carbohydrates. You guys have the little models that I gave you in class, and so you can cut those out, and you'll notice on here we have OHs on the right hand side and HOs on the left hand side. And so just like the animation you saw earlier, if you cut the OHs off of one side and the H's off the other side, you can combine them to form H2O, aka water. And so I want you guys to do that. Cut out 2 little water droplets and 3 glucose monomers and bond them. I want you then to stick them in your notebook in the upper right hand side of page 10 like you can see in the diagram, and we'll be filling in some more information around that later. So for today, cut them out, glue it on there, and in the next couple presentations you'll learn how to do the lipids, proteins, DNA, and the awesome slider. So let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, your materials are present in the room.